Hey there! I'm here today with pro tip number 1. This was supposed to be pro tip number 3, but after a student came in today, I just had to share this pro tip. Have you ever noticed when a student has been on screen a lot that they're kind of spacey, or they reverse their letters more, or the size of their letters that they're writing are inconsistent, things like that? If you notice that, that's because using the screen, a computer screen, a tablet screen, puts the child in a more visual spatial mode. So it actually exercises their visual spatial skills, which can be great, right? I mean, when we're driving, we need to be very visually spatially oriented. We have to know how far is that car from us, how close am I to the car in front of me, those kinds of things. That's really, really important that we be spatial, and we want to react quickly. And so computer games can help do that. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail here. You can check my playlist out on the Visual Spatial Learner. But the child who is very visual spatial, if they're on the screen, they're going to be exercising their visual spatial gift, which is going to also mean that their sequential skills are decreasing. So, because they're yin and yang, they need to be balanced. And the kiddo who is very visually spatially oriented is typically going to be a little weaker in the auditory sequential part. So we need to balance those two. And when the kid's on screen too much, it's too high. The visual spatial is too high. Academics tend to be more sequential and auditory based rather than visual spatial based. So a student came in today and he was making all sorts of errors that he typically doesn't. And he could not figure out the sequential aspect of the exercises we were doing. And he was just having a terrible time. And I know he struggles with that, but usually he's pretty good. And today he was just off the rails he just couldn't figure out the correct spatial positions. So I'm like, what's going on? This is not usually this kid. It's vacation. He's probably using his screen a lot more, probably using his tablet more. So I text his mom, I'm like, hey, has he been using the computer more, the screen, having more screen time? And she's like, well, yeah, he has. Okay, that's fine. But this is really good information. It means that we know that when he has screen time, it's going to build that spatial giftedness. It's going to play into that. It's going to decrease his sequential skills. And that's going to be really hard for his schoolwork. So we need to make sure that we're not giving him screen time before school. So anyway, that's fine. It's vacation. The kids should have fun. They should relax. But it's important. It was a really good eye-opener and reminder to the parent and myself that we need to really limit this child's screen time during the school week. In the classroom, you might notice this with the sizing and spacing of letters, an increased amount of daydreaming, or an increased number of reversals. Those are some typical things that you would notice with a child who has had too much screen time. Then I explained to the student what was going on, and he really caught on. He understood that his brain was out of balance and that visual spatial was just too enhanced right now, and that meant his auditory and sequential was too low. And again, you can check out my playlist, but it's kind of like this. The visual and the spatial was too high, the auditory and the sequential was too low, and he could not do his sequential exercises, which mimics the types of things he would most often be needing in school. So anyway, I had him do another exercise, and it was like that was a spatial exercise, and that was all screwed up too. He had a really hard time when he doesn't normally on that exercise. And so he has a twin brother, and his twin brother came in right after him. And I got smart. I'm like, okay, they have this very similar strengths and weaknesses. One of them is maintained a little bit more through medication, but they have really very similar ways that their brains work. So I was like really smart. I'm like, okay, we need to have him read. So I got out a book I knew he'd enjoy about a farm animal, because he loves farm animals. And he's in 5th grade. So I had him read just a few pages of this book. I had him read it out loud. And what that does then is that then exercises this side. And really, oral reading is like the perfect brain exercise, because it's both visual and auditory. And by nature, you have to go sequentially unless you're reading silently, in which case it can become a spatial exercise. And it's no longer an auditory sequential exercise. But reading out loud is actually the perfect exercise of blending the visual and the auditory. And so, when you do reading out loud, you meld these two together. It's like sewing them together, and they become much more in balance. So, keep that as your little tip, your little trick, that if the kiddos are a little spacey or they're reversing letters a lot because they've been on the screen, I'm not talking about normally, but if they've been on the screen a lot and they're starting to do some of those things, just remember, have them read out loud a few minutes, and that will bring their brain back into balance, and they will do much better on their schoolwork. Like I said, he caught on, and he was asking me questions about, well, what if the teacher has me doing something on the screen? I said, you don't have any control over that, but just be aware. He said, well, we know we come in after our screen time, we take turns reading out loud out of our science book. I'm like, perfect. Okay, so that's your pro tip number 1.